This is my very first encounter ever with something nefarious out in the wilderness. I was 17 at the time, and honestly, quite terrified of my surroundings. I had gone camping with my family, and unbeknownst to me, I would encounter something strange that night. See, while I was sleeping in my tent, my older brother, who I was sleeping next to, would wake me up in the middle of the night. I guess he had to go pee really bad. He was only 5 years older than me, and even though he was 16, I was kind of the braver younger brother. So I got up with him, accompanying him out maybe 50 feet into the forest, while he went and relieved himself. Our parents were fast asleep in the adjacent tent. As he was peeing, and I'm standing there just a little ways away from him, we hear something walking around in the woods right next to us. I had a flashlight with me. He had a cell phone light. We both shined it in that direction, but didn't see anything. Whatever. So he gets done, which felt like forever. The man had drinking like 4 or 5 bottles of water. We go back to bed, lay down in our tent, and we're just kind of talking how brothers do. We both hear the faint sound of our mom, except it's coming from the forest, and it sounds like her saying, "Hey, boys, come back here. I want to talk to you." And so my brother and I are just kind of looking at each other in complete disbelief, being like, "What? How is that our mom? Our mom was asleep in the tent right next to us. What?" And the voice keeps telling us to come here. Now we're both pretty freaked out because this voice is almost perfectly imitating our mother. Our dad is snoring, and our mom is also sound asleep. There's no way that whoever or whatever could be perfectly imitating our mother's voice. We kind of just sit there, huddling in fear, kind of scared crapless, to be honest. After maybe a couple of minutes, the noises stop entirely. And when they do, we notice the forest along with it is now quiet. No crickets, no wind, no howls, nothing. It's just dead silent. So I prod my older brother, "Hey, maybe we should go investigate." But he was basically like, "No way I'm going out there. Not after hearing that." I mean, he was genuinely scared. And I can't deny that I wasn't either. But I was also curious. And the little brother in me was like, I have to defend this family if he won't. So I decided to get up out of the tent and have a look around myself, with my older brother begging me not to go. I get out, shine my flashlight around, and of course I don't see anything, anywhere. So I decided to go walk over to where I had heard the noises initially, at least the voices. I saw nothing. No sign of anyone, or anything the voices could be coming from. So I walked back to the tent, still scared. The forest was still silent, and I had no answers. I was no closer to finding out what or who had mimicked our mother so perfectly. So my brother and I just sat in the tent and talked, and eventually we fell asleep, both still scared. In the morning time, my parents seemed happy and chipper more than usual. They asked us, "Did you guys sleep well last night?" We slept exceptionally well. I told them, yeah, it was kind of a rough night for both of us. My brother and I did not mention to our mother that we had heard her voice off in the woods, and we knew at no point in the night did she ever get up to leave her tent. I mean, my mom wouldn't go and just pee in the woods. That's not her. There was actually a faculty bathroom, not even that far away. Maybe a 3-4 minute walk? So, if anything, that's where she would have went. And she pretty much never is a get up in the night type of person to go use the bathroom. Anyway, I can't help but wonder what it was out there that we encountered that was able to mimic the voice almost perfectly of my mother, deep in the woods, in the complete opposite direction of where my parents' tent were. Back in 2008, I had got into a nasty fight with my girlfriend. Long story short, she kicks me out of the car in the middle of nowhere at midnight and drove off, leaving me entirely by myself in the darkness of the desert. I had no choice but to just start walking, using only my phone as a flashlight in the dark. It gets extremely dark in the desert at nighttime, and I'm all alone, so I was a little freaked out. As I'm just walking along on this road, all by myself, I hear something towards me. I stopped, and it was quiet. I shone my light around and began listening, but I didn't hear anything. I started walking again, and again. It kept getting closer and closer. Now, I was starting to get nervous and scared because something was coming for me. I started running now, and could hear something begin running after me in the darkness. It was really coming for me. I was sprinting as fast as I could down this road. I tripped and fell to the ground. The noise stopped, and I lay there for a minute, trying to catch my breath, while I could hear what was coming after me had stopped. I scrambled to my feet, shining my light all around, and I couldn't see a thing. Then I heard something snarling, just beyond the light reach of my phone. I stood there, frozen in fear for a few seconds, in the dark, only hearing this thing snarling at me. It was probably about a few feet from me. I panicked, shined my phone at it, and for the first time, I saw it. It was a coyote, but it was all wrong. It appeared ugly and disfigured and looked evil. I was so scared I just ran and did not stop running down the road in the dark, hearing this thing running behind me, getting closer and closer. I was so scared, I didn't know what to do. Then, just right over the horizon, I see the headlights of a car coming in my direction. I began waving my hands and jumping up and down. I was so happy to see this car. Then, as it got closer, I saw that it was my girlfriend. I could see that it was her. She slowed down and stopped right in front of me. She looks at me like I was crazy and asked what was wrong. In a sneer, she asks, "Scared of the night?" and demanded I get in the car now. She could see I was spooked and just made fun of me on the drive back about how she thought I was going to be such a wimp about it. I told her what had happened, what had chased me. She didn't believe me. I just wanted to go home and sleep. I never really told anyone else about it. I was scared they'd think I was crazy too, but it was pretty terrifying. She thought I was just trying to make her feel guilty, which was not the case. Even what she did was wrong, though. After that night, our relationship kind of crumbled, and not just because of this isolated incident. There were other things building up to it. She wasn't really the nicest of persons, and something like what happened that night just kind of sealed the deal. The next day, though, she tried to convince me it was just my imagination, and I really needed to grow up. I explained that there was this coyote thing chasing me, and even though it was a coyote, it wasn't. It looked all wrong. Anyway, I'm sorry if my story is dumb or anything, but I'm telling you, that was the scariest experience I have ever had in the night out in the desert. I've never been an experienced outdoors person, and I made the mistake one summer to go camping by myself when I encountered something I was not prepared for. I always knew I should have never gone camping alone, but I did it anyway, like I was trying to prove something. I made a major mistake, of course, being a rookie and being so nervous about it. I forgot one crucial thing: shelter. I packed my backpack with enough food and water, but I forgot my sleeping bag. I didn't want to turn around and call my friend, telling them I was too scared to camp. So I just decided I would just find some leaves and make a makeshift bed. I did have a small tent, so I guess I did have shelter after all, but I needed to do something. So, getting nervous and trying to calm myself down about what I was going to do in this strange predicament, I decided meditation would be my best takeaway. So, I found a nice spot and sat down for a while and tried meditating. I had come all this way and made all this time sacrificed. I was not going to give up now. This was a nice spot near a large lake. I had a beautiful view and a nice breeze. It was making things a little easier for me. I thought this would be the perfect place to meditate. I sat down, closed my eyes, and opened them, and started to meditate again. Just as I had my eyes closed, and I was really focusing in, a very loud crackling sound comes from the woods. This is where the story kind of changes. So I opened my eyes and looked around. I couldn't believe what I saw. Not even 30 feet away from me was this huge black bear. So I sat there frozen, tried to meditate again. I mean, I had no other option. I felt if, like, I were to get up and run away, this thing would have chased me and eaten me. I could feel my heart beating really fast. I thought if I just sat quietly, maybe it would go away. But I was wrong. The bear kept coming closer and closer, and it was making these strange noises, like huffing and groaning. I began to pray to God that it wouldn't come any closer, and I would be okay. I knew if the bear got closer, I would probably have to fight it off with my hands or something, which I knew was not a reality. This bear waltzes right up to me. It begins sniffing me, acting very strange. I stay as still as possible, not knowing exactly what to do. I'm sitting there, squeezing my eyes shut, not exactly sure what's going to happen next. And then, this bear just stops, stands up. I swear to you, this next part is real. I know it's common for bears to stand up on their hind legs, but this thing was standing different than a bear usually does. It was standing more like a man does, and even began chanting, as I recall. The bear began chanting, and I swear to you, I heard a voice say this aloud. It was almost telepathic, because the voice appeared in my head, not audibly. I heard the voice say this: "It's not what you think it is." I heard that loud and clear, and I opened my eyes again, and I saw this bear transform into a man, standing there almost like a statue. Now I'm terrified, and in front of me I'm seeing this person, what looks to be exactly like an old Native American man, covered in a large bear headdress with large animal skin draped over him, staring at me. This is all happening really, really fast, and I just don't know what to do. This person or thing just stands there, and I'm frozen in fear, not knowing what I should do. I don't know if it's a dream or what at this point, but I know I'm not dreaming. I know I'm awake. The next thing I know, this thing or person is chanting again, this time louder, and I swear, I hear the voice say again, "You have to go." And I had this vision of myself walking off into the woods, and suddenly I'm back in my tent. I don't know how I got there, but I'm actually in a sleeping bag this time, and I see a big sunbeam coming through the tent. I'm sitting up and it was morning time. Somehow, I don't know if I arrived in an alternate reality or what, because somehow I have a sleeping bag when I didn't bring one before. I was completely confused at how it was morning time, early morning, when I was meditating in around the mid to late evening. But all I knew was that I was alive. I didn't know what happened, but I knew I was very lucky. So, taking my chances, I packed up my tent and left. I can't even begin to describe to you just how freaky the entire thing was. I've never been one to hallucinate or just make up stories. Everything I'm telling you is true. I felt that I was very lucky to be alive. I don't know why I was spared. Maybe it was to tell this story. I don't know. I know that I will never go camping again by myself. I used to think it was just a coincidence, that I was attacked by a bear and that it was just some animal trying to protect its territory. Now, I believe that I was spared because it was maybe an omen. The Native Americans believed that there were these spirits that lived in the woods. They called them shapeshifters. I believe that that is what I encountered, and that it was some sort of shape-shifting spirit in the form of a physical, large black bear. Why it came up to me, though, and targeted me, I'll probably never know. One time, while out by a large river that runs by my cousin's house in Ohio, I saw a strange figure moving quickly through the woods. It was like a large black panther that was walking on two legs. It had the same body shape and size of what you'd see as a large black panther. It had no tail and I could not see any ears. I watched it for a few moments as it moved quickly and swiftly through the woods. I could not see any eyes or discern any hair. I was so shocked that I could not move at first. I was afraid if I moved it would see me. I was afraid it would come toward me, actually. It sure was strange looking. As it moved away from the river, it turned to the right and walked up a large hill toward a back road. I watched it all the way until it was completely out of sight. I'm telling you, I've never seen anything like that before. I believed I was seeing an alien. I think this because I have seen flying saucers in the sky. I also think I know what I saw because, well, I have seen a lot of strange things in my life. I've seen things that can't be explained. I saw something in the sky about maybe 7 months ago. My son and his girlfriend and I were sitting under a large tree in my backyard. I quickly saw a flash of light in the sky. It was maybe the size of a dime, and it was a flash of light that was so bright, I could not see anything else. The light was so bright, though, that it actually hurt my eyes. I was afraid to look up at it. I could not see anything else. I think what I saw was a flying saucer. I think this because the light was so bright and fast. But I have seen other things in the sky that I cannot explain. I have seen them when I was a child, and being born in 1942, I've been seeing strange things as long as I can remember. But the weirdest part about the whole Black Panther creature experience was that it appeared to have a skull-like head. Almost kind of reminded me of a skull head covering that some Native Americans used to wear back long ago. That's what it reminded me of. I've been out in the woods here and there my whole life, and I've not seen anything like that till this sighting. Call me what you will, but the thought of it alone still spooks me. I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, and have lived in the Kansas City area my entire life. Moved out here to Ohio about 10 years ago. In the mid-60s, I saw what I thought was a UFO while I was driving home from work at night. I was on the highway just about 2 miles south of the KCI airport. I was on the frontage road when I saw the object. There was a very large glowing oval-shaped object, and it was going from horizon to horizon very fast. It was so large that it took up the entirety of the road, and it was kind of a glowing reddish color. I thought it was going to hit the ground, and I was going about 60 miles an hour, and it was moving very fast. So I stopped the car to watch it, and I could still see it, as if it were moving sideways. It was going so fast that it was still there when it went over the horizon. It was like it went over the horizon in about 3 seconds. I could not see anything else in the sky when I saw this. No stars and no other lights. It was so large, I figured it must have been something out of this world. I've never seen anything like that before. What's weird is I've heard some other people in the area talk about UFO stuff, and then shortly after, mention seeing these large shadows of people or creatures with horns on their head, skeletal heads actually, that are reminiscent of Native American culture. The whole thing is very interesting, and I wonder if there's any correlation between the two. The following is from a man from the town of Newbury, Ohio. This town is located about 60 miles from where I live, and I have lived here all my life. The man tells of a strange event that took place back in the 60s. In the 1960s, there was a family of 4 that lived in Newbury. Their names were Mr. and Mrs. Ogston, and their 2 children, a boy and a girl. The household was rather strange in the fact that George and Ruth Ann were kind of odd, both very religious. Not in the sense of being a strict religious family, though, but they were very good, non-judgmental people. They appeared to be very nice. George and Ruth Ann were both in their late 30s, and their children were both in their teens. The boy's name was George Jr., and he was your very typical teenager, but also very shy and reserved, while the daughter was a very sweet girl and very intelligent. She was in her senior year of high school and was the older sister at the time of this strange event. One evening, George Jr. and his mother were sitting in the kitchen talking and listening to the radio. The radio that was in the kitchen was rather old and was on the fritz. It would turn on and off by itself, and you would have to turn it off and on again to get it to work. The radio was on, and George Jr.'s dad was in his bedroom in the back of the kitchen. George Jr. and his mother were sitting in the kitchen. George Jr. was leaning against the kitchen table, facing the door when the radio turned off. He looked up out of reaction and saw his mother suddenly looking up at the ceiling. He looks up and sees a strange shadow passing over them. It looked like a man with hands on his face, looking down at them, but it also resembled a wolf spirit, very native in appearance. It was very dark and looked like the shadow of a man covered in animal skins, not anything that was transparent. He said it passed over them very quickly, almost like a dark cloud passing over the sun. He said he was so scared that he ran out of the kitchen and ran up to his room. He said he stayed in his room for a long time after and never told anybody, and his mom would just never say a word about it. In the morning, George Jr. was getting ready for school, and his sister was just getting up. His sister told him that she had seen the strangest thing that morning. She said that she was in the bathroom brushing her hair when she looks up at the ceiling and sees this Native American man standing there, a Native American spirit. She said that it was so creepy, she screamed and ran out of the bathroom. She told her brother that it was the same figure that he saw in the kitchen the night before. George Jr. and his sister both later told their parents what they had seen, and they all thought it was a very strange occurrence. Perhaps this incident was caused by a Skinwalker spirit, or maybe a shapeshifter. I don't know, but I have to wonder. Well, as it turns out, within 100 yards of their house, years and years and years back, there was a large mass grave pit that was dug to throw the bodies of Native Americans in, once being slaughtered by the invading Western Europeans after a very small-scale skirmish had taken place over territory. At least 30 Native American soldiers were shot and killed, and their bodies thrown into a mass-dug grave and buried right there near that house. Is there a connection here? I lived out in the backcountry for many years, until I moved closer to the city. I've seen some things out there, things that would just creep you out. The scariest, though, was when I'm pretty sure we had this strange creature come onto our property. I'm pretty sure it was a skinwalker of some kind. I just remember hearing this weird howl in the night, and then we'd start seeing these big paw prints all along the ground. I remember my dad and I did have a big argument about it. He said that this creature never really came onto our property because it was scared of us since we lived there. I think he was just trying to pacify our overactive imagination. I told him, though, I thought it was a skinwalker, and that it could come and go as it pleases, since these beings possess so much black magic and raw power. It's scary. I think it was stalking me and my sister at one point or another, and I swear, I saw it. It was tall and skinny, and even had long claws at the end of its hand. It reminded me of a wolf that walks on two legs, but it looked like it was starving and frail. Had missing flesh all around its head, too. I don't know if I believed in skinwalker stories, but I do believe in them now, and other creatures. I've also read about them, and I've seen things too. Not just this skinwalker stuff. I know this sounds crazy. My dad ended up getting rid of the creature by using sage and driving it away for the time being. He still doesn't believe it was a skinwalker, but believes it was something. I'm not sure what, though. It did not come back for a long time after that. I think it was gone for at least the rest of that year, until the following summertime when my dad got rid of it again with sage. But luckily, I had already moved away to Arizona for a while, and then back to Utah. That's also right around when I heard about a wendigo. I've never seen anything myself, but I do believe after my experiences that they could be out here. I've heard some very strange stories of how these things like to eat, and they like to eat people, especially. I don't know if any of this is true, but I just wanted to share my story with you. I know it's not the scariest, but it is true. But I do have some questions about some of these other beings. I'm sure the wendigo is real, just like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot. I just don't think they're as terrifying as people make them out to be. I think people maybe just have their own imagination, and they don't know what else to think of these beings. I do think, though, that if a wendigo does exist, it probably doesn't eat people. I'm sure they just eat other animals, and I don't think they're as bad as people might make them out to be. But I guess I can never be too sure, because, after all, I can't imagine running into one of these things myself. I've never seen anything myself either. I'm sure I might be seeing my share of these, though. I'm planning on going on a camping trip this year, and I'm sure I'll see some wendigos on that trip, if I'm lucky. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but before I end this email, I did hear a wendigo story once. It goes something like this. There was a man who was out in the woods hunting, and he was looking for some food. He was getting pretty hungry and needed to eat. He was thinking of how he couldn't find any animals to kill for food. So he was thinking of what he could eat to quench his hunger. He was getting pretty desperate, as time and hours and days drew on. And now, he was thinking of how he'd eat anything. He wasn't finding anything out there, though. Not even a squirrel. He was getting so desperate to find food. But then I guess he finds some berries on the ground and begins to eat them. They were somewhat poisonous, I guess, but he didn't care. He just wanted to eat. He then notices a deer carcass laying on the ground. He didn't know what was going on, but figured the deer had probably died of natural causes. It did not have any visible or noticeable wounds, so he ate some of it raw. He figured that he was going to be sick, but he wasn't. He didn't feel sick at all. He actually felt pretty good. He felt stronger. He was thinking that this was amazing and he was actually able to eat this dead deer meat without feeling guilty. He was thinking that this was better than eating meat from an animal that he had killed. Easier to do so. He was feeling pretty good, strong and energized. He felt like he could do anything. like he had a superpower. There was something to that dead deer that apparently had changed him. It turns out, it wasn't just a dead deer carcass he had found. This dead deer supposedly had a hex cast over it by a Skinwalker witch that caused him to eat and gorge himself on the corpse of the deer like some rabid wild animal. The man soon ended up turning insane, ripping off his clothes, growing longer limbs, longer teeth and claws, and not long later, he became what's known as a wendigo. Of course, it's just a story that I'd heard before growing up. But it does make you wonder, though, because stories have to come from somewhere. I think sometimes there might be truth to it, but maybe not to the extent the story makes it sound. Anyway, I've noticed that you're pretty good at telling stories, and I'm pretty sure that you know a lot about some of these creatures out there. I know that you know a lot about the wendigo. I've heard some of the stories about these things that you've posted. I've also heard about skinwalkers, minus my own experience, but just from your channel, I firmly believe they exist. I know they're out there, and I know you of course have heard of them. So before I end this, I just wanted to ask you some questions. Could you please answer? Do you believe in the wendigo? Do you think wendigos are real? Have you ever seen one? I've heard that wendigos are like shapeshifters. I've also heard they can mimic people. Like they could be somebody that you know or see them around. I've heard they could also be a person that you're even friends with. Maybe even a family member. They can disguise themselves as anything and everything. They can, just like a skinwalker, can shapeshift and transform into these cannibalistic beings. Anyhow, I'd love to hear back from you and know what you think about skinwalkers and wendigos and how the two relate. Just so you know, I'm a creature magnet. I'm serious. I've had a large handful of creature sightings all throughout my life, multiple times as a child, run-ins with Bigfoot, you name it. And I think this specific day that I encountered what I believe was a skinwalker, forgive me if this ends up being a garbled mess, but I'm going to try and do my best to accurately portray these. Probably one of the stranger things I've ever had to deal with was when I was out of my deer stand one evening, and I saw this strange being that I could not identify what it was. I couldn't really see much of its features due to how dark it was, but there was enough light that I could tell it faintly had arms out in front of it, in a very hostile position. At least the stance it was in was. I had my rifle with me, and no idea what I was dealing with exactly, other than knowing it was not a person. I thought it might be a Bigfoot, so I was going to shoot it. I aimed at it with my rifle, took one deep breath, and then BAM! Fired off a shot. I hear this thing let out this terrible scream like I've never heard before, and took off running into the woods. I was pretty scared for a little bit because I didn't know if it was injured or what, so I immediately packed up and went inside. Didn't go back out from my stand for a couple of days. Now, real quick, before you jump on me for thinking I'm crazy for shooting something I don't know what, let me tell you that when you get a distinct feeling in the pit of your gut, like this thing is out to hurt you, or that there is something very wrong, you just know it. I trusted my instinct. I knew deep down that this was not a person or a deer. I knew I was dealing with something else entirely. Trust me on this one. I've had a few run-ins with Bigfoot myself, and even though those have all been fairly peaceful, I know there are things that go bump in the night. This thing, though, I can just tell its intent was not good. And I've seen some weird stuff in the woods before, but I think the most bizarre thing I've ever seen was this creature that I could not identify. Although, all the creatures I've ever seen, I could not identify. I don't know what this was or where it came from, but I can tell you with certainty, I know it was not a Bigfoot or a deer. It did not sound or look like any of the two. The closest comparison I can make for you is in the game Skyrim, which I used to play religiously years back. There are these creatures called hag ravens. They are half bird and half witch. Something like that, but these creatures in the game have talon-like claws in their hands. The creatures in that game are similar to what I saw, but not completely accurate. It looked more like a deer, but it had that same hunched-over stance position, and the same thing with its clawed hands stretched out. But honestly, I don't know what it was. I do know that it was not normal. And again, I've had many strange encounters in my life. This next one I'll share with you is what I believe to be a skinwalker as well. And I'm not sure if this was real or just a dream, but it happened when I was 12. Me and my family would always go fishing down by the creek, close to a campsite that we had frequently visited. It was a really nice little spot down there with a small fishing hole. I remember it was a very hot day this day, so we decided to go wade into the creek, swim around a bit and cool off. We were all in there cooling off, and my brother, my sister and I, and my dad and my mom. I remember I was wading in the creek with my dad when I looked up and saw some weird creature standing on the edge of the water, looking at us on the side with the trees. I remember it being this ugly, zombie-looking deer creature thing, tall and brownish in color, with long arms and claws and dead, dangly flesh and mangy-like skin. And it had some kind of weird elephant-like tail. It was just swaying back and forth, like it was thinking, plotting. Now, this creature looked completely different than the one in my tree stand story, and any of the other creatures I had seen. This one reminded me specifically of a cross between a man, a deer, and a zombie, I guess. Anyway, I don't know how I knew this, but I could just tell this thing was malevolent. It was staring at us, but I didn't think it was going to attack. It appeared to be plotting and strategizing. At least that was the gist I got. Like it was constructing its mind on how it was going to hurt or kill us. I don't know how to really explain it. I just knew deep down it was dangerous. I remember I looked up at my dad and told him to look, but he didn't. It's like he couldn't see it. Then, I remember we all began to wade out of the creek and walked back up to camp. That thing followed us, just standing there on the edge of the creek of the path that we were walking. It was watching us. I remember we all walked back up to our campsite, and I just had this sense that something was going to happen. I don't know why I felt that way. Fast forward a bit, and I remember that night, me and my family went to sleep in our tents. I woke up in the middle of the night, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. I look up, shine my light, and see the silhouette of that thing standing just outside my tent. But it was just standing there, staring. It had its arms stretched out, like it was reaching for my tent. Then it stopped, as if I had caught it, and it froze. Then it just casually lowers its arms and walks off. I don't know why I saw it. I'm pretty sure it wasn't a dream, but it was so vivid. I still remember it happening to this day. I don't know. It was just one of the strangest things I'd ever seen. Extremely scary, though. I just don't know for real if it was actually there. Maybe it was a really vivid dream. Like I told you, I've had quite a few strange experiences that are hard to describe. Most of them have been in the form of just weird, unexplained noises that I've heard out in the woods, or even strange shapes and things moving about. I've had some other weird things happen, but I'll only share a handful more with you, just for the sake of keeping this email from getting to a novel. This one is probably one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. I was with my brother, and I believe this time we were four-wheeling. I remember, we were on this long trail when we see a strange creature standing in the distance. This one looked like a wolf, but it was different in color. It was very light, almost like a white wolf would be. But it was totally hard to see in the distance. But my brother and I were getting closer, and we're both looking at it. We couldn't quite make out what it was. We were driving along the trail, and the more we got to it, the closer we got. We could tell it was standing on its hind legs, and it had this weird coloring to it. It was very light brown. It was strange. It was just standing there looking at us. I remember my brother and I thinking to ourselves, what is that thing? It was very strange. So we got close to it, and it just turned and ran off into the woods. I've never seen one like that before. I don't know if that thing was a wolf or something else entirely. Maybe an alien wolf or something. I don't know. I don't know what that thing was, but I've never seen anything like it. I got the impression from that encounter that it was maybe curious or watching us, but I'll never forget the goat-like horns that sat on top of its head. Oh, and another thing I want to tell you about is yet another creature I've seen walking a trail by a logging road that we go to. I was out in the woods one day with my brother again, and we're walking across this old logging trail when we saw something move out of the corner of our eyes. We turned and looked, and there was this weird creature just standing there staring at us. It was a cross between a deer and a goat. I don't know what else to call it. I mean, it had a deer's body and a goat's head with horns. It had a long neck, and it was standing on its hind legs. It just stood there staring for a second, and then quickly turned and ran off. You want to hear another one that's weird? I was out hunting by myself one time, and sitting in my tree stand, and different than the first one I shared with you. I was watching the trail when, all of a sudden, this weird creature comes walking out of the woods. I remember it was a very sunny day, and I could see this thing clearly. It was a bipedal creature. It was maybe the same height about a man, maybe a little shorter, but it was hunched over like it was in pain. It had a long, thin body and was barefoot. It had long, skinny arms, legs, and very long, spindly fingers and a thin neck. No hair on it, but it did not look human. It had this weird head and no ears. It was a very strange-looking creature. I remember the strangest thing about it was that it had a weird-shaped head, very reminiscent to that of a horse. And I remember looking at it and thinking, what in the world is that? It walked along the trail and then it stopped. It just stopped and didn't move. I kept looking at it. I did not think it would come after me, but I was still scared. So I kept looking at it, wondering what I should do if it decided to come after me. I already knew. I would shoot it. I was just going to wait to see what it would do. It stood there for a few more minutes, perfectly still, and then vanished. Anyways, as I've said before, I've had to deal with a handful of these strange encounters and creatures, but man, some of these are just too much to handle for me. I hope you could at least get enjoyment out of my experiences. If anything, maybe they will be some use to you. Feel free to email me back if you have any questions. Not my story, but my grandmother, who grew up on the Navajo reservation. She has some pretty scary stories of encountering what she calls black witches. She refuses to name them by their name for fear of calling them. She always told me they are evil, and certain parts of the res you need to stay away from. They never show themselves to the living, and they have the power to possess the living. She told me that she was once attacked by one of these witches, and was unable to move until she was rescued. She told me that if I ever encountered one, I should close my eyes and pray for God's protection. When I asked her why she did not call the police before when seeing them, she responded that police can't do anything about them. They don't handle and refuse to handle paranormal and spiritual matters. These are demons, and that unless you yourself have the right power, you are powerless. My grandmother is a very strong woman, and I never for a second doubt anything she has said. She is not a liar. I know in my heart that she is a good, truthful woman. I am a full-fledged believer myself in the spiritual world, and she has had many encounters with spirits and have seen many others that things couldn't see. She has seen ghosts, orbs, shadow people, and all types of other things, including these shapeshifter beings, along with also having been attacked by them as well. She has also encountered what she believes are these strange reptilian demonic beings. She has seen them and has been attacked by them. She was in bed one night sleeping and heard an extremely loud sound, as if something was dropped down the stairs. It was loud enough to wake her up, so she opens her eyes and looks towards the door. She saw the shadow of a figure standing there. It wasn't that of a person. It was much larger. She tried to scream, but couldn't move. She was paralyzed. Only had the ability to blink her eyes. It was there for a few seconds and then was gone. She knows it was not of this world. She has had many other encounters with these shapeshifter spirits, and they all have one thing in common. They're evil. There was this one encounter, of course, that she had told me later on that it was trying to break in and harm her. She was around 12 or 13 when this happened, years and years back. You have to remember, these shapeshifter spirits are very violent. She also has a friend who lives in the middle of nowhere. She lives in a small town without any other houses around, except for her own. There's no power to her house, so she has to use solar panels to power her own lights. She has a large generator that powers. She has had many encounters with the paranormal herself. She, too, has seen shadow people, orbs, and many other things. Her house is constantly being attacked by these evil shape-shifting spirits, the same ones that attacked my grandmother at a young, tender age. She has seen it many times, and yes, it is terrifying. She has had her house broken into, destroyed. She has had many of her stuff broken and destroyed. She has even been attacked by these spirits like my grandmother, and has been scratched, stabbed, clawed, and worse. She has been awakened in the middle of the night, holding her chest in pain, and her heart feels as if it is going to explode out of her body. She has a feeling that these spirits are connected to her house. She says she feels these spirits are trying to take her over. She's been to the doctor and has had numerous tests. They cannot find anything wrong with her. She just says these things are trying to kill her, and that she is constantly being monitored. I know in my heart that the spirits are trying to take her life. The spirits are these shapeshifters who can astral project and attack in spirit form. The worst was when my grandmother was held down and, well, you know. The shapeshifter demon did that to her when she was 15, just to make her suffer while she had to lay there, agonizing, paralyzed. Even her grandfather suffered a massive stroke and heart attack at the hands of these beings. I don't know how much you know about them, but if you can, do yourself a favor and don't go anywhere near the res and stay away from these beings. A few years ago, I met a man. We connected instantly, and for a while, I thought he was my soulmate. The only problem was, he had to keep going out of town for work. I had no idea what he did, and he never told me. I knew he was lying to me, though, but I couldn't help but love him. I loved his accent, his wit, his passion, his personality. One night, I went to his house and he was in his kitchen, just staring at the wall. When he saw me, he said in a low voice, "I have to leave, I'm sorry." He had done this several times already. Strange behavior and leaving all the time. I didn't know what to say, so I just said, "I can't do this anymore." He didn't say anything. He gave me a hug, escorted me out, and left as well. And that was the last time I saw him, and I never found out what he did, but I think he knows what I would do if I ever found out. So, a few days later, after I got home from my last trip to see him, I saw my neighbor walking her dog. She waved and we started chatting. I told her I was trying to get back into the dating scene, and she told me about this guy she had met. I don't know what it is about him, she said, but he's just so different. He's got a great sense of humor, and he's really into ancient cultures. I think he works for some big company. He's always going on these trips. I told her I had the same kind of feeling with the guy that I had been seeing. She told me he was the one, especially when she showed me the picture. Then she tells me that he says that he's a skinwalker, a witch who wears the skins of animals to become one with the animal spirit in order to take its powers. I was skeptical, but I had been feeling something strange about that guy. I had never even heard of a skinwalker, but as I began looking it up, I found a story in the news about a man who had been killed by his family while trying to steal their power. It said that the skinwalkers are born with the power to shapeshift, but they can acquire the powers of other animals by wearing their skin. I don't know what to think. I'm not sure if he's a skinwalker or just a liar with an animal fetish, and that he's somehow back from the dead. Either way, I'm done. I had a pretty incredible journey years back on what I like to call a spirit trip to the desert. While the trip was incredible, at the very least, I experienced something that terrified me and shook me to my core, and met the guardian of the woods. I just want to say up front that while I was taking ayahuasca, the encounter itself was more than just me dealing with physical beings. I was dealing with spiritual beings. You see, while being on ayahuasca, my third eye was opened and allowed me to come into contact with these spiritual entities. I was walking through the desert and going through this forested portion on a dark night when I heard rustling. So I turned to look and see what made the sound, and petrified when I see a row of dark figures approaching me. I knew down in my soul, these were skinwalkers. I tried to run, but they were too fast. They grabbed me, held me down. I felt their claws around my neck. They dragged me. I couldn't breathe. They were going to kill me. They were sucking the life force out of me, and I knew I was going to die. As I felt my life draining from my body, I closed my eyes and accepted my fate. Then I heard a voice. It was different. It was a deep man's voice, and he says, "I'm the protector of the forest. I am the protector of nature. I am the protector of the animals. I am the protector of the people. I am the protector of all things natural. Who are you to come into my land and try to destroy my people?" I felt the skinwalkers immediately release their grip, and I heard them say, "We are your people." And then I was alone. I saw this man, just him, and he tells me his name was Weya. He said that he was the protector, and I told him I was sorry that I had come into his land and disrupted his people. He let me go and allowed me to leave virtually unharmed, for the most part. I left that night a much stronger person, we'll just say that, and I've never endured such an experience before in my life. I know this story probably sounds kooky, and you might write me off as, "Oh, he was on ayahuasca," but I'm telling you, this night, I met spiritual interdimensional entities. That is what happened. One day, back last year, at the start of the whole pandemic, I sent my daughter on a grocery run because I'm partially disabled after a bad work accident nearly 9 years ago now. It was in the evening time, and we're roughly about an hour away from the store, so it would take her a bit of time to get there, get the food, and come back. Well, enough time had passed at that point that it was getting later and later, much past the point she should be getting back home, and I was getting concerned. I tried calling her phone, but much of the drive to the store is no service. By the way, we live out in the middle of nowhere, up in the mountains, and so there isn't much service through most of the drive. As it was getting later, now nearly an hour after she should have gotten back to me, like last time, I was getting nervous and very worried. You know how mothers get. I kept checking outside and checking my phone. Nothing. I was looking through the window of the house, wondering where my daughter was. She had gone to buy some groceries for dinner, but now it was getting dark, and that mountain road is dangerous at night sometimes. So now my heart is pumping. I say a quick prayer and went to the door to open it, because I swear in that moment, I thought I heard her outside. I could have sworn I heard her voice. Just as I walked past the window to the door, I noticed something outside. I turn around, and there was this hideous-looking thing trying to press its face up against the window and break in. I scream, running into the bedroom to grab my phone to call the police. The next thing you know, this thing is trying to break through the window, and it's hissing at me. I'm now lying by the bed on the floor, in full view of this thing, and I'm terrified. I'm gonna die. I'm going to die. I was convinced. And like the cavalry showing up in the nick of time, I catch a glimpse of the truck headlights pulling up, shining through the window. And I see this thing turn to look, and it takes off, darting into the trees. My daughter comes rushing into the house, checks on me. I am hysterical. I'm a 55-year-old woman with a bad hip. Had that thing gotten in the house, I would have been a goner. She saw it too. I know she did. We don't know what we saw, but it was really ugly looking and resembles a dog somewhat. I told her about hearing her voice just before I saw that thing, and she wonders if it had been watching us and mimicking my daughter's voice. My daughter knows a lot more about this kind of thing than I do. She suggested that it could be something called a skinwalker, but I don't really know what that is. So she showed me your YouTube page and how you have so many episodes on this topic. Do you think you could help me out? What sort of being did we encounter?